Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Digital Marketing Live, show number 164. That's right, coming to you continuously for over 3 years. We're in our fourth year every week. Having an awesome time, actually. It's been a lot of fun. We are changing, however, the format of our show slowly as it begins to be... we get feedback and sentiment from you, our listeners, and so forth. And we found out that most of you are listeners. Even though this is a video broadcasted show where we have all the talking heads, we have our guest hosts and so forth, we're getting a lot of sentiment and feedback from the surveys that we're sending out that you all tend to listen to it like a podcast in the background. You've also told us that you wanted to know a little bit more about what exactly the show's content will be early in the discussion of the show, so that you can understand if it is something you want to listen to, if you want to be able to come back to it at another time, because most of our listeners tend to listen to it on the recording side of it, where they don't catch us necessarily live every Friday morning when we run the show, because we are in 28 countries. A little over 6,000 of you listen to us every week, which is phenomenal. And because of that, there's a whole mess of time zones. So you don't often get to catch us, and I can attest to the time zone thing. I've done the show broadcast from Shanghai at 2 a.m., Honolulu at 5 a.m., Vancouver at 8 a.m. We were all over the place. So Australia, I even don't remember what time I did that. I think it was in the evening. I think somewhere around 8 or 9 in the evening or something. Can't remember the time. But anyway, so we understand the time zone issue. And we understand that you tend to listen to it. So what we're going to do is Robert Cole, one of our co-hosts, who should be joining with us shortly, puts together an amazing, well-curated list. Now, as you know, we do this in support of HSMAI, the Hospitality Sales and Marketing Association International, and their digital, or actually their marketing board now, it used to be the digital council, now it's the marketing board, is shared privy to the list that we curate, or the one that Robert curates, as a preemptive to the show. We send it out the night before. Now, Robert has agreed he's going to make that a little earlier in the week, and then our co-hosts are going to look at the topics as we go forward and be able to do direct contributions of things that they find of particular interest. We tend to do it as a grab bag historically, where we've gone over and said, okay, here's our list. Let's pick what we'd like to talk about. We bounce around. There's times where we get off on tangents, as you all know from listening to us, and we don't always hit all the topics. But you do know that all the ones that have been curated by Robert are put onto our website and to the archives, and you can go back at any time and see all the topics that he did curate. That list is always available to you, and that's at hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. You'll see all of the show links for this year to date. Then there's links, of course, to the archives of the years past, and you can go in and see all the lists we have, all the topics we thought of each week that we had brought up and discussed, and you can go in there and find those things. But with this now, what we're going to do is we're going to announce a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today, and we're going to try to keep it in context of time. So as we talk about the topics, Mr. Robert Cole, how are you, sir?
Hello. Structure? Good afternoon.
Structure,
good morning.
Order, right? I mean, what in the world is going on with this? I was trying to give the audience, as they listen to this, is that a little bit of how we're trying to change the format and all the hard work that you do in curating the list. And we're going to try to preview a little bit of the topics. I was hoping, not having given you a pre-warning as to exactly how I was going to tackle this, I'd like to maybe take a topic out of each of the categories you've given, and we put them into a list to say, okay, this is the first thing we're going to talk about, second and third, and after that we're going to have a couple other ones, and then at that we start the discussions associated. We try to keep ourselves, and this is the part that Ed doesn't think you're going to be able to do. He doesn't think that you can keep the genie in the bottle and keep your conversation timelined. He thinks that Robert is going to go off the reservation. That's what he said. He said.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. He thinks that Robert is going to just spend an hour talking about the first one because Robert can, and that's what he thinks. So I'm here to prove him wrong. I know you're here to prove him wrong, and he's not here because he's a little abstentious. He's like, there's no way I'm not going to do that. No, actually, he's doing a family thing, and he already gave me a forewarning he wasn't able to make it. As is also Stuart. Stuart said he wasn't able to make it.
It's National Drink a Beer Day, so that's where
I think that's his motivation as to why. Yes. Aye, and we have
and Tim Peters here, and actually two things. Valen Perini is trying to get on.
Yes. I sent her Ed's link. Actually, I thought it was a wonderful thing.
Oh, good. And number two is I hear an echo from you.
Oh, yeah. Let me turn something down.
Headset. Sorry, guys. I'm gonna mute my thing for 1 second and step away and go get a headset, and I'll be right back.
All right, Mr. Okay. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Well, so with this in mind, what I'd like to do, Mr. Robert, if you'd be so kind to take your.
We now need a screenshot. This needs to be Tim's new profile picture.
An empty cap. You know what it is? It looks like Captain Kirk's chair. Is what it looks like.
Tim is so attuned to marketing around the world. He has become one with it, and he's transcended. He's lost the need for his physical body to just become a pure marketing mind. It's
That's
phenomenal.
What it is. Okay,
It's just really
so,
it's awe-inspiring. So,
Mr. Robert, if you would please announce what our top story is today that we'll start with, and what you think would consider to be the next story afterwards. You will give some context to our first half hour.
oh well, the way I structure these, and I really think for the show we need to figure out a way where we can publish these earlier. We've got to figure out how to be timely, but to publish them earlier. And what I'd love to see is to have here are 3 possible topics under the various categories. So what I'll normally do is put together a topic.
That I'll talk to you in the green room afterwards.
Okay.
I have a really neat software that will allow us to actually do a shared survey out early, so that we can have a poll as to what people consider to be the ones they find of highest interest. So I already have a solution in mind for that. So we're good.
Well,
Mr. Tim, how are you, sir? You hear us well?
I don't know if you noticed my facial reaction a moment ago. I plugged my headset in, and the volume on the headset was like at 37. On a scale of 1 to 10. So not only did I hear you well, I almost fell over back when
I thought
you were hearing us.
I thought it was 37 on a 1 to 100. So.
No. On a scale of 1 to 10. Mine
we
goes to 11.
And we have
we're always louder because we have 11 on our speakers.
Exactly.
Spinal Tap at its best. All right.
And we took a new profile picture of you with the empty chair. Our theory was that you had transcended, you had shed your physical being and transcended to a pure marketing intellect. That was really where.
It's funny because my mic was muted simultaneously, so you're also getting the same value from an auditory perspective.
I called it the Captain Kirk chair. That's how I did Kirk chair.
A new minimalism. And Valen is joined. Yay.
Yes, Mr. Robert, if you would keep to the context of we haven't briefed Tim as to our change in strategy, but if you would tell us the topics.
That's okay. We're going to get. Okay. Just a brief preamble. The way we normally structure this is a top story. Hello, Valen. We're adding more structure to have program and explaining how it's going to work. So all this 7
minutes to do it.
7 minutes in.
I have one comment on this. So I was listening earlier where Ed said that he didn't believe, he figured that Robert was going to go off the reservation. Isn't that like the pot calling the kettle black? Really?
Very much so.
And if you've ever seen me present, I pretty much always hit my time to the minute. I mean, stuff may get pressed in, but I do. I really don't go over.
You are the only person I've ever seen do 37 slides in 25 minutes.
That's right.
And do a pretty good job on it.
And do a pretty good job on it too, by the way. Yeah, that was not a knock. That was a simple statement of fact.
And I always put too much in. I always put too much information on my slides so people can take them home afterwards and kind of not have, here's a bunch of stuff like what did it do? That is intentional.
Thing, right?
All right, so I just took us off the reservation. All right, so my fault.
So
actually,
here's generally the structure. Generally, the structure would be a top story that I think might be, and we'll figure out a way to raise that so we can have more people than just me unilaterally figuring out what the top story is. But then I have a variety of categories. One would be brands, so things about different hotel brands. Another would be intermediaries like OTAs. And I will sometimes put Google in as an intermediary or Airbnb, and sometimes
as well as you should.
Yeah, it kind of works that way. Marketing as a general category, tech, and then, of course, the beloved rut-row, which is just one of the things that happens to come up where you go, whoa, what's that? Sort of
Fantastic.
thing. So for the top story, this week, I felt that lifestyle brands are building hotels now. Here's why that actually makes sense. And I think a lot of people might look at that and just go, yeah, big deal. But this is from the Harvard Business Review. Not that everything the Harvard Business Review, writes you should necessarily read and take to heart, but it had a great quote in here. If I can find it. Okay.
What I liked about that piece was that it had nothing to do with the hotel industry. So it was everything to do about marketing, which was when I read the piece, I was waiting for, I thought, wow, Harvard Business Review is getting into the business of, evaluating assets in the hotel industry, but that's not at all what it was.
No.
Not at all. So the author had one sentence, which I think should actually either give hospitality marketers great solace or make them feel very disappointed. So it is, and I'll quote him: "After all, what more visceral, intimate way is there for you to articulate and communicate the lifestyle attributes of your brand than to invite customers to live in a space that reflects those attributes?"
Word.
Basically saying,
what else is there to say, right?
Yeah, it's like you have the best industry to engage people from a lifestyle, emotional perspective. So
you're going to give it away to retailers.
Right.
Well,
yes.
well, and it is interesting.
You're going to give those attributes and that space away instead of underscoring your own brand values and competencies. You're going to give it away to whomever, right? West Elm or Camper.
Right.
Yep.
And it's something that hotels have done for a long time. I mean, if you look at, the hotels who partner with insert your favorite other company here for the linens or for the soaps or for the whatever, instead of saying, no, we actually provide this because we want you to have that great experience. And if I can add one quick thing to that, the thing that concerns me for the hotel industry, and I don't think we have a story about it this week. I was looking real quick, but there's been a lot of this over the last couple of weeks. Look at where all of Expedia's investments over the last year have been, and look at where Booking.com's investments over the last year have been. And it's all been into the guest experience on property, mostly. So clearly the OTAs also pre-arrival and on property, right? It's all about, okay, we now own the booking component of the value chain. Right. Now let's start to get deeper into the value chain and get more intimate and familiar with the customer, with the guest in those other spaces. Right. And that's, something hotels should be very, very conscious of and say, how do we not get this done to us? Oh, I don't know. Again.
Could we assume that these types of properties by and large are independents?
I would think so. I would think so.
The lifestyle. The
lifestyle. You would bump up against brand requirements, right?
Yeah.
At some point.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they're going to, if you do a West Elm, I mean, actually, this is not a new concept. Laura Ashley, for a while, was doing, I don't know if they still have them. They may still own them. They had done that, was that in the 2000s, maybe even the 90s.
I think it was the 90s. They were a hot brand, even earlier than that.
Yeah.
Right.
Speaking as a woman who used to buy Laura Ashley when I was younger.
Right. Yeah, and the brand kind of faded, but they had a couple of hotel investments. I know there was one on the East Coast somewhere, and then they were doing maybe a couple. And they had one in England, I think. So but they've kind of faded out. So these things aren't easy. I mean, Chris Hunsberger, I think, is working with Restoration Hardware. Chris was former president of North America for Four Seasons. I think there are a ton of these, and what a better, especially if you're a household or some sort of brand like that, to go, now you can stay in our place. Branson did it somewhat with Virgin. I mean, even though he was really a Virgin or a music brand to start off with.
And a licensor also, right? I mean,
exactly, yeah.
I mean, Trump, if you think about it, has done that all along, right? I mean,
absolutely.
If you think about Trump hotels, all the Trump branded stuff is licensed, when it's been about a specific, without getting into any other part of the Trump thing, is about a specific vision of the world, right?
Stop getting political, Tim. We hate when you do that.
So it's interesting. So this feels like this is obviously another sort of competition point for brands, right? So now if I'm an independent or I'm an asset owner of buildings and I am considering brand versus not brand, now instead of just being an independent, I can be a different kind of branded independent. With the marketing, I mean, Camper, West Elm, they're not slackers when it comes to marketing, right? And getting their message out there. So this could be, if you have the right kind of asset, if you have the right kind of building in the right location, this could be quite attractive, instead of branding it with a branded boutique name.
You know who could do well with this, and I think they've tried this at various points over the course of their history. But I mean, if we think about this from a hotelier first perspective, right, as opposed to the brands who are getting into the hotel space, look at what Belmond has done and how they're talking about going back to the Orient Express brand and things along those lines. Orient Express could own that really nicely. If I were the person who was looking to acquire that brand, and is it Accor who owns that brand now? I forget who owns it.
For Orient Express?
For Belmond. Who owns the name Orient Express? Yeah.
The train. Yeah. I don't know if somebody bought the train. Yeah, but there was a falling out. I mean, the genesis of Belmond was there was a falling out. I think where Orient Express wanted more of a VIG, right? For their name, or so there was some sort of thing either between the licensing or control, something like that. So that's what caused the celebration or the separation, not the celebration.
It depends on your point of view, doesn't it?
But my understanding was Orient Express was then going to do their own hotels, but then really didn't. Right,
and Belmond has come to realize that the name Belmond has exactly zero cachet, and so
Belmond. I think I wrote a blog post on that very early. I'm pulling one out of the Tim Peter bag. that was just a really, really bad naming strategy sort of thing. I mean, it just kind of picked one out of the bag. It just didn't mean anything and didn't have any reference, which you can do, but then you have to build it from zero, which is really difficult.
Right.
And that's what these lifestyle brands are doing.
That's right. They give. There are lots of big globals that have released lots of brands into the industry recently with names that don't mean anything, right? That have been come up with by a marketing firm or something. And so to your point, they want
to get the trademark. Yeah.
Right. But they have to build it from nothing, right? They have to create the backstory. They have to build it from nothing and compete for eyeballs out there. And why, it's easier. Camper, people know what camper is. People know what West Elm is. So I think this is fascinating, the impact that it could have on how asset owners figure out what to call their properties and who to go with.
Right. And there was a piece in early August in Skift. I will get the URL to somebody who can share it because for some reason I can't share things. But there was a piece in Skift that talked about the fact of Belmond is looking to put itself up for sale, and they are looking at the fact of can they reacquire the Orient Express brand name and the like. And I think this would be an enormously positive play for them.
And if you're Orient Express, the price on that name just went up.
Rosewood, for instance, is one of the folks who seems to be interested.
Oh, absolutely.
Who also would be a great brand to do this kind of thing, right?
And Rosewood has their Chinese backing through, New World, right?
New World,
so they've got, that would be a great combination because Rosewood needs more scale. Belmond needs more scale. And again, actually going back to the Rosewood days, I wound up doing a lot of work on, it was basically the St. George's Hotel project, which became the Lanesboro, right? Which was a Rosewood property.
It used to be one of mine at Leading when I was
That's right. Leading. Yes, that's right. And the challenge for Rosewood, actually, since its inception, was that they had the Hotel Bel Air, which was great, but they didn't have a New York one. Then they had the lands, and you had to nail down kind of these key international gateway cities. Especially back then, pre-internet, you really needed to kind of get and they could never get New York. And now it's kind of ironic where they've got the Carlisle, but they no longer have the Bel Air. They don't have the Lanesboro. So they've never been able to really put that sequence together where they've created great hotels, but the Mansion on Turtle Creek in Dallas isn't the center of the universe for international business travelers and international monetary fund folks. And they'll pop through, but they aren't going to be there constantly, right? To be passing through through those gateway cities. So,
I think it's a great article, and I think it's a great move. And I think hoteliers who are watching this and people who run hotels watching this should take a look and say, this is a place where we can play. This is a place where, because the Laura Ashley story you told points to the fact that I don't think most of the lifestyle brands who are getting into the hotel business know what they're getting themselves into.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
I don't think they're in it for the long haul. So I think it's far better where a hotel brand or a hotel company or a group of independents or things along those lines looked at how do we get into a more of a lifestyle component than the other way around.
Yeah,
right?
That's really interesting, because then instead of them being a competitor, they become basically a co-opetitor or whatever that word is, right?
Right, exactly right.
And
exactly.
to your point too, who knows how long Camper owning a hotel or running a hotel will fit into Camper's marketing strategy, right?
Right.
In 3 years, they may go, yeah, we're done with this. And then the asset owner is going, so now what?
Right. Every time we have a downturn, what happens is everybody who's expanded says, oh, it's time for us to stick to our knitting and get back to the thing that we reviewed. Right. I mean, every time, so all it's going to take is somebody to have a bad quarter. They're going to be like, so we're going to get rid of our hotel assets because we don't actually do that.
That's right.
Whereas for a hotel to say all of this stuff of we're going to provide for a lifestyle around this makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Well, and that's the problem with the hotel industry in downturns, because all the folks, even not the lifestyle guys, just the pure real estate folks who go, oh, well, we were doing residential or commercial, let's go do some hotels. This will be great.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they go, oh, no, now we don't just have to pay for the note. There are a whole bunch of people running around this place that are expecting paychecks every couple weeks and everything else, right, that goes into it, which is a big chunk. And when you start going into it, and maybe not for these lifestyle brands, they might not be under this, but when you look at a typical hotel owner, if you've decided to go with a brand, there's some sort of VIG out there, which averages 12% according to HVS. And again, that's if you're, top line room revenues. Hey, you got to pay the credit card company. That's another couple percent. Oh, we need professional management company in here. That's another 3%. And oops, if an OTA comes in the booking source through that, because people don't know your brand very well, you're up to a third of your gross room revenue going out to kind of intermediaries on this before you've paid a cent of your mortgage, before you've paid any gas, you have any, the electricity's not turned on, the water's not running. It's a challenge.
It's remarkable that people walk away from it.
Yeah, exactly.
If I could say, it's a great crossover, and something to what Valen had asked about as a suggestion to the show as well, that we, as hosts, to have particular articles we might find of particular interest. A little bit of what you're talking about bleeds into a little bit of the brand discussion in relationship to Hilton, how they're trying to change the conversation of the ship, and their direct booking isn't as direct relationships, and that same sense of things is like creating that collaboration directly with the product to the consumer rather than using the intermediary profiles as much in the consideration process. So I don't know if we can step to that from where we were, and if there's
actually one that might be even a little segue before that is Best Western has launched two new boutique hotel brands, right? And Best Western, who famously for decades had one brand, that was it. It was Best Western, and they were really good in the they kind of 3 and some 4-star hotels in Europe, and generally kind of 1 to 2-star roadside sort of properties in the U.S. is now up to 13 brands with these, which is equal to Hilton, which is a pretty radical growth. But the new brands, Sadie and Aiden, I think we're saying, don't mean anything. And they have very different logos. They do say by Best Western, but there's not really strict Best Western, branding around them. But they're going to try to be very, very, different sorts of things. Sadie's going to be in the upscale segment, and the upper mid-scale Aiden brand. I don't know. We'll have to see what makes those really, really different. And
this goes back. I can't say if it's a good move or a bad move. Right? It's not a bad idea. Right. Execution matters a ton.
Execution is everything on these. Right.
It's certainly the right idea. I will tell you, I was at a non-industry thing yesterday. It's been really long.
Really? Interacting with people outside the lodge. What was it like, Tim? Tell us.
Well, to be very clear, I was actually teaching. I teach with Rutgers University. I do a lot of work with Rutgers Business School, and they have a partnership with the Mendoza School of Business at Notre Dame. So they do a program out in Chicago for the Mendoza School. So that's actually where I was. And one of the folks for their capstone project took a hotel brand, and they took Hyatt specifically. And they were talking about, brand extensions and things along those lines. And we were having this very discussion. And what was fascinating was the vast majority of people on this team who had chosen Hyatt as their capstone were millennials, or as I like to call them these days, adults under 40, right? We need to think about these folks for who they really are, right? These are not kids. These are adults who are getting into their prime earning years and all. And they all of them, admittedly, focus group of 4 or whatever, but all were raving about Moxie and how much they like Moxie and how cool it is and it really suits them and all this other kind of stuff, right? And so it's just a good sign that you can do this. You can bring a new brand into the market and you can reach the correct target audience and all of that other kind of stuff if you do it well. So if Best Western executes and, gets the rubber to meet the road correctly and stuff, I think it's a really smart move for them. But obviously that's a tough thing to do. And
Moxie was a brand.
I'm surprised if they didn't get it right, honestly.
Moxie was an acquisition, I think. I don't think that was a pure kind of greenfield project from them. I think Marriott picked that up. Were they in Spain or something? They're very small. They were small.
Tiny. I mean, it was as close to greenfield as you can get for an acquisition, right? There were I think there were like
for somebody of that size. Yeah, for somebody of that size too.
Right. I mean, full disclosure, I think the statute of limitations has long since passed on this. Everybody involved with it is gone from the company. When I was at Wyndham, we picked up Dream. And that went spectacularly. Oh, wait, no, it didn't. But again, it was a situation. Was it Dream or Night? I want to make sure I'm saying this the right way. One of those two brands, we bought both. And both were tiny little acquisitions, and both were things where we partnered with a developer who'd already built a couple, and we were going to grow this into a big thing. And at least one of them didn't work. Both I think have been spun off. I'm actually looking because maybe Wyndham.
I mean, these two remind me. So there's the hotel brands or the hotel companies are just salivating over adults under 40. And so there are so many now. I'm reading how they're describing in this Hotel News Now piece, how they're describing these two brands. And, you could lift these words out and stick them into a press release about Radisson Red as an example, right? So there are so many of these types of brands cropping up because the hotel companies have said, ooh, look, all these adults under 40 they're all getting jobs and they all have money, their own money in their pocket for the first time. And they're taking jobs where they're traveling and so forth. So on. There's so many of these. So I like the idea behind these brands. I've stayed at a Radisson Red as an example in Minneapolis, and I quite liked it. Again, no front desk, desktop, little small desktop computer on one of those movable things. And here it says the barista and the bartender is your concierge. It's exactly what it's like at Radisson Red. So and I'm not singling them out. It's just that everything that they talk about reminds me of the stay that I had at this other brand that's new into the same space. So I believe there's room for these types of brands, but there's a lot of them all of a sudden. And so some of them are just not going to be successful because there's just going to be too many of them.
Right.
But
And
the niche is valid.
Right. Yes. One of these, what's interesting about the adults under 40 phenomenon, if we can talk about that for 2 seconds, is They are about to become the largest demographic in the country. By 2019, they will outnumber boomers because, unfortunately, some boomers are starting to leave the space altogether, or age out, right? Well, no, I mean, let's call it what it is.
Why
Right?
did you
I mean,
look
they
at
are
Robert when he
aging-
says that? Why did you look at Robert when he said
would
that?
you rather I said drop dead? I mean, one of these is a little more polite, right?
I'm sorry, little, little louder. Couldn't quite
man.
hear you,
Hey, man.
whippersnapper.
I want to point out for the record that I'm Gen X and nobody gives a rat's ass about us. So, everybody talks about boomers and millennials, and it's like, all you people in your 40s and early 50s. Yeah.
And all of us have it easy. All of us have it easy. My 20-year-old daughter, her generation doesn't even have a name.
Well, that's
So
true.
they
Well,
don't come up
actually, if
with
you want to be
anything.
very technical,
How
only one generation technically was ever named, which is baby boomers. It was named by the
Boomers,
United
yes.
States Census Bureau. Is actually where that comes from. That's the only one that officially
baby
from the government has a name, but nonetheless, right? So millennials are starting to outnumber boomers is the first thing, and secondly, and as Valen pointed out quite rightly, that their share of spend is going up dramatically now. Now, for a whole bunch of reasons that stem from the downturn and the like, I've been reading a lot about this over the last month or two. There's some concerns that their buying power will never get to where boomers' buying power was.
Right. Yeah.
At the same time, their buying power is still going to be the biggest segment for a time because they're going to be the biggest generation and they're going to be the ones who are making the most money.
Right.
So you have to get there. But Valen, I think your point is spot on because if they don't differentiate the brands between themselves, what they're really setting up is the Sheraton of the future. Right, and I mean that exactly.
I was going to pick on Sheraton earlier.
I'm quoting that. I'm going to be quoting that.
Right.
Future.
Right, you're not building the Ritz.
Any of my Marriott friends out there, I didn't say that.
I can look. I'm a Wyndham shareholder. You want me to say Ramada? I mean, it could be. There are a handful of brands that exist today that are legacy brands that have no meaning to anybody. And the companies know that. I mean, it's not a surprise to Marriott that Sheraton is a troubled.
Right. And they've publicly stated it in the last couple of months.
Right.
Yeah,
and Wyndham says the same thing about Ramada. Like they need to do something to refresh those brands and make them relevant to
And they're
not just
large,
younger travelers, but all travelers, right?
But they're also not huge portions in the case of Wyndham of their total portfolio, but there are a lot of these hotels.
There are a lot of Sheratons out there. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
and
sure.
it's interesting, even for Wyndham, pick on Wyndham a little bit.
Yeah.
Howard Johnson's, right? I mean, where I think they're trying to do some stuff.
A good job, Howard Johnson. Honestly,
yeah.
Now,
but for a while, it really died off, right? I mean, it just was the complete lost child, right? So,
right.
But that was an iconic brand. I mean, all these, these orange roofs and things like that, and clam strips, and they had these kind of iconic. That was a big. They had it was kind of this iconic brand, right? That just kind of died off because they couldn't figure out how to. I mean, it was an iconic brand of the 50s, early 60s, kind of retro, but it was in that period where it wasn't retro enough. It was just kind of out. It was lost, kind of like
It wasn't an antique. It was just old.
Exactly. Exactly. And people weren't fondly really reminiscing about it or anything like that. But So anyway, and they are doing some good. And I think there is an interesting kind of retro angle that they can do now with it, which is good. So so these brands can come back. It's just it's hard when you have 600 of them or 1,200 to go reposition all this.
That's right.
And I think there is a playbook for that. I mean, if you look at Holiday Inn, and admittedly, it was more of a brand extension than it was a new brand or a refurbish of the brand. But I mean, you look at Holiday Inn versus Holiday Inn Express. I mean, when Holiday Inn Express came along, Holiday Inn was dodgy as all get out, and I think the name had very little cachet, and any mind share that it had was definitely, Holiday Inn, those used to be good, right? Right? And Holiday Inn Express really turned that around in a big way. They did a nice job there of turning that into a brand that people really liked. And if you think about all the amenities we take for granted in an economy in the mid-scale space, Holiday Inn Express pioneered like 90% of them. You know, the free breakfast, curved shower rod, Wi-Fi, etc. That was a lot of Holiday Inn Express there.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll even put in an alternate example of Howard Johnson's. They tried to maintain brand integrity too long. And then when they did decide that they tried to adapt, they just diluted their entire brand existence by pandering to anything that seemed reasonable to toss in at that point, and they lost their footing completely. By the time they joined the party was too late, and they lost their identity completely. And
by
the way, I quoted you on LinkedIn. I didn't say it was you. I just said the show said that, but I quoted you on the Sheraton of the Future thread. I said, we just said that.
I'm gonna get t-shirts. I'll get t-shirts made. It's okay. I don't care.
Yeah. And Tim, you're so lucky that Lauren is now doing this advanced tagging technique where he's really got all these things down to the specific clips where it can link and cross-reference all the brands that are mentioned.
Again, I would have this conversation with Marriott, anybody from Marriott to their face, and they would say, "You're right."
That's why they're so
smart
good.
People, they know this.
Right. They all understand it. And even Radisson, with its rebrand, Radisson said publicly that the Radisson brand, as opposed to Radisson Blue or Radisson Red, is also sort of lost its way a little bit, and they're focusing on it, on how to really define what the brand means. Because what they're doing is these legacy brands, these sort of foundational brands, just sat out there, and then these new brands like Holiday Inn and Holiday Inn Express. I think that's a good analogy for Radisson and Radisson Blue. They launched Radisson Blue mostly outside the U.S. There's a couple here, but those brand. When I go to a Radisson Blue in Europe, I know exactly what I'm going to get, and I know it's going to be pretty good. But when I go to a Radisson here in the States, I don't know what I'm going to get. And Radisson Hotels Group has recognized that as they rebrand themselves as an entity and restructure the corporate entity, that brand needs a little bit of work. So, these global hotel companies, they're not stupid. They understand when brands have lost their way.
And even Marriott with the Marriott Main Street. And that was an acquisition to get properties in Canada, right? That was just a flat out geographic inventory play. Yeah, exactly. But for mainstream Marriotts, I think Courtyards ran through that, right? People love Courtyards. Sure. It stands for them. They know exactly what it is as a fantastic brand. And in many cases, it cannibalized kind of some mainstream Marriotts because you go, wait. And in some cases, they get higher ADRs. For sure. Which is crazy, right? That was supposed to be a step down, which made a lot of sense. You had your full service Marriotts, then you had your Courtyards, and you had your Fairfields. Everything strategically looks perfect. Then all of a sudden you start going, wait a second, what's going on with the Courtyard? Beating up on the Marriott. So.
Well, I'm going to go back to an old thought, and I'm trying to remember who said it. I can never remember the guy's name. I want to get it right.
If it's old, it was probably me. No.
No. Well,
that's normally how this show goes. So,
you're not wrong, Robert, but in this specific case, one of the original, big ad agencies, I can't think of the guy's name. But think Don Draper in the real world, right? One of the legacy 50s, 60s ad agencies, and the head of the ad agency said, came up with a saying I use all the time, which is a brand is a promise. And what you just said, Valen, is so right about where these brands have gone wrong over the years is, when you go to a Radisson Red or a Radisson Blue, you know what you're going to get. If you go to a Courtyard, you know what you're going to get. If you go to a Holiday Inn Express, you know what you're going to get. And the challenge that some of these legacy brands that are struggling have is when you go there, you have no idea what you're going to get, right? The promise is good luck with that. Right? which they usually have a good time meeting, but it's not the right kind of promise. And that's really what they're struggling with, of what is the promise that this brand is making to you as a guest. The one thing that I think a couple of the legacy brands probably have to their advantage right now, if I were running, and I could be wrong about this, but if I was running the Sheraton brand for Marriott, I would look at this as a great opportunity, because I think as we get into the adults under 40, I don't think they have any perception of the brand. I think the bigger problem is Gen X and boomers and those of us who've been around for a while. We know what Sheraton used to be and say, oh, that, it's got some troubles now. Whereas I think the opportunity for Sheraton or Marriott, or Ramada or whomever, is to say, this is a whole new thing. Forget what the old was. This is a new thing. And if they can roll it out successfully, they can put themselves in a really good spot.
To look outside of our industry, I would equate it that they have the same opportunity that IHOP and Dunkin' Donuts had. You have a lot of places and a lot of things. You're not the lead brand in that market anymore. Starbucks has come in or other things, and nobody buys pancakes as much anymore. And there's some very creative people that decided, well, we have one great thing for us. Is we're in a lot of locations right now. So before we start losing all those locations, how can we redefine ourselves in the market so those locations are of interest for people to do? I mean, Dunkin's changing its name now to not being Dunkin' Donuts because they want to expand their profile of market space.
Coffee
IHOP
has better profit margins. Quite frankly, that's why.
When you first looked at Starbucks and their explosive growth, you thought Dunkin' Donuts was a dying place, and I believe that Dunkin' Donuts was getting there was a foot to the throat kind of thing, that they were losing ground everywhere. The Starbucks was crushing them until they started waking up and smelling the coffee. And
well played, Lauren. Well played.
Nicely done. Nicely done.
And IHOP, the same thing. It's like that was an old concept from a generation change. Going out for pancakes on weekends before or after church. I mean, that's their institution, and they were losing ground. I mean, I stopped going there when you stopped picking up the serve bottles and they were sticking to the tables more than the tables, you stuck to the seats. Remember all that? That was the IHOP that I remembered. And then all of a sudden they start doing all this crazy stuff. And
Lord, no, when the linoleum on the tabletop started to come up when you picked up, that's when you really. That was the
that was the IHOP I remember. But now they're completely cool. And I think the Sheratons, to your point, Tim, and Ramadas, anybody else that has that. They have market presence, and maybe even the markets they're in have shifted and their purpose has changed. But there's a whole opportunity of they're already there. They don't have to be created into the market. They need to be redefined. And that's the opportunity that they're facing. Yeah.
There is one other great turnaround story in there that I would look at. And I somebody was talking about it actually in this class that I was teaching the other day. So that's the reason I know about it, is Buick. Buick, for those of us above a certain age, I mean, Buicks were kind of lame cars. Nobody wanted them. Well, they really are.
We got to
Whoa. In high school, I drove a 1964 Buick,
and yet still your wife married you. That's the cool part.
When you were in high school in 1964 driving your brand new Buick.
In the late 1964 Buick Wildcat convertible, 455 engine in it. Power steering, air conditioned, had a little thing on the top which would sense the lights coming in.
Your wife married you simply because she knew that you were not trying to impress anybody, so you must be genuine.
Does Edie know?
That was a cool.
That was talking about a 455 engine, though. I mean, let's
That was a cool. That was a very cool car.
Sure, in 1964, and maybe even in 1979, but in 2000,
man. And try to find one now, and check the price of these classic beasts. And both of my parents have passed away, but my mother, who hated that car because it was originally the car of my uncle, right? My father's brother, who passed away, which my mom may have been pleased about because she did not like him. Finally convinced my dad to sell.
This is the part I warned about. This is the part I warned about.
Reservation. We have just left the
reservation. This is a catharsis for me. I need to tell my story.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've now officially gone off the rails and we're on the Buicks.
That's right.
Ed, you were right.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I was traumatized by it. I need to share it publicly.
All right. So anyway,
not to make light of every. No. The tragedy of this car was sold for $2,000, and 2 weeks before. 2 weeks before.
What date was that, Robert?
I found. Oh no! There are
Stop
people.
it, Lauren.
You won't stop me. I won't be stopped. I'm just doing that for Tim's benefit. For Tim's benefit. Anyway, there are buick owners who will not sell those for six figures now. So, anyway.
So there was a legacy car brand that should remain frickin' nameless.
This is a lovely. Oh, sorry.
It's still pained. Still pained. I don't have that car. Sorry.
Remind me never to mention General Motors brands from the middle of last century ever.
Oh no, I don't like any others.
Don't mention the B word anymore.
Can you clip these few minutes, Lauren?
That's right. We'll fix this in the edits.
Buick is a trigger word.
It's a good thing this isn't a live show or anything.
Unfortunately, no. All this gets left in. The only part I ever clip is the very, very beginning when I'm like scratching my head or something before the show starts. That's about it. But yes, that's that. Yeah. Okay. Ed's going to listen to this and go, see, I told you so.
Right. You're right, Ed. Right. You're right.
No, you're right. Okay, topic-wise, Valen, is there a topic that you would like to bring to the table?
Well, I thought this was actually, until about 3 minutes ago, I thought we had a good segue into that.
I think it was more like 15 minutes ago, but that's...
into that Hilton article, right? So if we talk about sort of legacy brands, we have Hilton, but what Hilton has done is move away. So this whole, I love Anna Kendrick. So let me just say that right off the bat. I think she's great. So what Hilton has done is less about the brand and more about why, what we do for you, right? Not why you should stay here, but everything that we do for you.
Right.
And so it's really that. So the article was interesting, but the ad itself was fascinating. I mean, it was just the way they talked about the experience and what it is you're going to get, what we're going to do for you, as opposed to what you're going to get when you stay with us. I thought that was great. Although I will point out that Anna Kendrick is a beautiful woman, and she puts on a polo shirt, right, and which underscores, even as beautiful as she is, she still looks awful in a polo shirt. So no woman alive ever looked good in a knit polo shirt. Just saying. Okay, sorry. I'm back on the reservation now.
Oh, and I still want to comment about your comment off the reservation, but I won't. I have such strong feelings about this Hilton thing. It makes me so happy. It's not even funny. Like, I am giddy like a schoolgirl about this.
Yeah.
Because one of the problems I've had with the Book Direct campaigns. Actually, I have two problems with the Book Direct campaigns, and they speak to things that have bothered me for decades. Literally the entire time I've been in the hospitality industry. I came into the industry in about 2001, and we've been having the same conversation for the last 17 years, and they are finally getting away from the conversation that we do wrong constantly. And the two mistakes that we've been making for 17 years is, when we talk about rates and the fact that we've got the best rates and yada, 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 and, member rates and all this other kind of stuff, we keep reinforcing to guests that if you keep looking around, you're going to get a better deal.
Right. Absolutely.
And that is the dumbest thing to teach guests. We should be teaching guests, here's why you want to talk to us directly. Forget the rate. Let's talk about the entire experience. Let's talk about the value, etc. So the fact that they're doing that makes me incredibly happy. The second thing is that Book Direct is something that very few guests get.
Right.
It's something that they don't understand. I have had conversation with guests repeatedly that, you talk about, well, you should book direct. And they say, well, I did book direct. I booked directly with the hotel on Expedia.
Right.
The idea of the channel is irrelevant to the guest.
Exactly.
They don't care.
Right. And we had this conversation last week where Google will say, book direct with us. Right. So the third party have, so that word means I mean, it's coming to be meaningless in our industry.
Well,
certainly meaningless to the guests.
I think a lot of people are still looking at it because they aren't the inside baseball people that we are, right?
Right.
The hotel is just some place to stay because they want to go see Hamilton in New York something, or they want to go skiing or whatever. They've got a purpose, and the hotel.
Let me add to this too. Last week's conversation that there is not even a clear definition of what direct means in our industry.
Right.
We don't even absolutely properly ourselves.
Right.
So of course it's a use because we don't even know what it is we're talking about ourselves when we say direct channel.
Right.
I think
the
a lot
fact
of
that Hilton is saying.
Yeah.
So the fact that Hilton is saying, build a relationship with us, and let's talk about the value that you receive when you are part of the Hilton family or whatever words they're using and everything is such the right approach. And I really hope this works well. I want to be fair. The book direct campaigns have had some success. I don't want to say it has had no success. I do want to say that it's only so meaningful to the average guest and that it was always going to be capped by that. So the fact that they're shifting the dialogue is so important.
I was also interested in this article. One, I completely agree with you, Tim, in the sense that this is a great shifting concept for what we're talking about. And in very first person's case, I'm rebuilding a site for a client, independent hotel, Tense Market, and literally the two topics of conversation we had about this is we want, of course, everybody wants channel shift. They want to take it off, pull from the OTA, move to whatever channel you can control costs on and so forth. But where I was able to steer the conversation because of some cool new technology I have is I can create custom dynamic content in the websites so that and it can be tailored according to the source of the geography of the person that's coming, their behavior on the site. I can modify a lot of stuff as to what content they see. So now the engagement and value of going to the channel direct to the website directly for the hotel is there. And because I looked at it that there's two ways we're going to beat this. One, OTAs is the best booking experience out there right now. So we have to improve our booking experience. That's the dollar side. The other side is the relationship side, that our website is the engagement of understanding what to expect when you arrive, what we can do to make your stay the best it can be. The OTAs can't do that as effectively. So the site is structured about being very flat and thin. So there's multiple entry points to engage the site. The second is the content is customized to the engagement that brought the guest there. And then I have custom bots now that can address language variations and so forth, but also are tailored to the topic of the page they're directly assigned to. So the bot's not the same like a Facebook Messenger bot that has the same thing. Each page has its own engagement opportunity with the bot, so that I don't have to pre-guess what the engagement value of the page can be. I can put the page for its content value and allow the bot to help guide the engagement of the guest that's there, because I want to make the relationship with the hotel, knowing that they're going to go out and look around, knowing that the process of discovery is still the same, knowing that there's some channels of opportunity that they can still assume. But but if I can identify with them that I will match anything they find, and I will improve their relationship with us by doing it directly with us, and there's value to that. That's the whole build I'm doing right now, which is why when I saw this Hilton thing, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly how I'm thinking now, is that this is how we have to chase this down.
By the way, Lauren, I agree with everything you said. I want to point out one thing, because this is really important to me. The tech is cool, right? The tech is cool, but the tech is only cool because it delivers on what hotels should be doing in the first place.
Absolutely.
Right.
Don't go for the shiny. It's not a shiny object engagement.
Correct.
Right.
It's built on the strategy of how do we help the guest based on what their needs are at a given time. I have told this story for years. You probably all know this story. I know at least two of you were in a room when I told this story to a room full of people at a conference once. But, there's a very famous story about a guest checking into the Ritz-Carlton in Marina Del Rey. And during the day, they were working in the room, and the guest dragged the desk over by the window so that they could look out at the boats and stuff while they were working. Stayed overnight, got on a plane, flew to Miami, checked into another Ritz-Carlton. When they went up to the front desk, they were told, "Oh, welcome, Mr. So-and-so. We have gone ahead and moved the desk by the window for you. But if you would like, we can go ahead and put it back in its regular spot." And in the early days of telling that story, people would say, "Man, they must have a really great CRM." And my point was, no, what they really had was really well-trained housekeepers and really great focus on the guest experience. Right. They could have made a phone call. You don't need a CRM for that.
Oh, they totally had a manual process, right? All the old they had pads of paper in their pocket where they would write stuff down and then put it in a box. I mean,
it's not that hard.
Right. There were boxes in every housekeeping closet on every floor.
Right.
Totally manual process, right? No technology, the right process.
And the technology and the right process based on, are we doing the right thing for the guest?
Right.
Because then you can automate it and do all kinds of cool crap, right? Then the technology makes sense, and then the technology makes it faster, cheaper, better, etc. But it's all built on, are we actually engaging the guest and helping them with the need that they have at the moment that they need it to make for a great experience, which will make them want to come to us, I don't know, directly. I mean, that's what we want. That's how you do this.
Yeah.
I feel most strongly about this.
Life's mystery solved.
But it's so straightforward, because if you book directly with them, the hotel knows who you are, and if the hotel can actually do something with that, which is, I think, one of the downfalls of a lot of the major hotel groups, right? They've expanded out dramatically. I mean, the Hilton article said they're up to 50 or 60 million members or something like that. Marriott's saying 110 million, but I think that's just adding the Starwood people to the Marriott people. They're still trying to net that out, right?
Right, and not trying to digress. Not trying to digress, but I did read an article, and I would point to the article. No, it was about Marriott and Starwood and the like, and they talked about how dramatically they've grown their thing, and then they said in like parentheses or in a footnote, including the Starwood acquisition. I'm like, well, sure, they've grown dramatically. Anyway, sorry, please go.
Yeah, they just haven't netted those out, which is not going to be. Right. 1 + 1 is going to be equal to about 1.2. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No,
but with Hilton, I mean, I think Kellen Smith Kenny, who's their CMO, former I think Capital One, I think she might have been with Disney before that, I'm not sure. Really whip smart, and boy, targeting exactly what's important. And as Valen said, she loves Anna Kendrick, right? I mean, Valen, you should be a target Hilton customer across their 15 brands. You travel a lot, things like that, and it spoke to you, right?
Yeah, but I'm not going to watch the Ryder Cup, so I will not see that advertisement.
You've already seen the advertisement.
That's true. I already
exactly. Yeah, who cares?
Nobody watches the Ryder Cup. Everybody sees the advertisement.
A small axe to grind. So I'm doing persona marketing for one of my clients, and I know that we're chasing certain demographics that we've profiled out for certain business cycle segments, and so we want to chase down some YouTube ads. Now, YouTube ads are not, just to Valen's point, not always going to be segmented to all the demographics. And this goes back to a perennial argument I've always had with owners. They love seeing the porte-cochere because they own it, and they love to see their name in lights because they can. So when I made this video ad, I made it very edgy and based on the demographics and age and the gender that I was looking for, so that would be put as a YouTube video ad. I was very proud of it. I showed it to the owner, who was not very happy with it. That is spring break in the concierge, or yeah, it's like they're already staying at your hotel. Number one. Number two, it's a persona that you identified that we were pursuing. Number three, it's for a platform that is not what you watch. So it's not as if you have to be offended by the fact that I'm talking about nightclubs and events and things, and you're not in the nightclubby mood. And he's like, no, it's like, okay, you know what? We just won't chase that little angle down. We'll just go a little bit more traditional. But it says it goes back to the old adage, like know your market and know what you're chasing for and being on the channels. And Valen, to your point, the ad is for that segment for the golf. If it resonates with the demographics based on the ad run, they're going to start splintering it into other channels or other demographic opportunities because they see there's an engagement there. So not all ads show up for everybody all the time.
Well, and Lauren, one last point to add to that, and this is a conversation I've had with many clients over the years, and I remember a very contentious board meeting with one of our boards back in my Wyndham days, which is also all of those things you said were true, and you're not the customer. Right? We didn't make the ad for you. We didn't message this for you. We didn't do the thing we did for you. We did this for the guest.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
There was a mute justice are the most dangerous focus groups in the world.
There is a justice to this. We did bring in some influencers to the hotel, exactly of the demographic that the ad was for. And one of the influencers did see the ad because we knew them directly, and they thought it was a wonderful ad. And why weren't we running it? And in front of the owner says, "Oh, we were planning on to." And I'm like,
"Hey man, however you get there, it doesn't matter. It's all good."
Yeah,
really.
Yep.
That's good news. I'm glad you're right all the time. Anyways.
No, but that's it. It's the voice of the consumer. It's customer experience. It's all the stuff has to be the full. And thank you, Hilton, for pivoting away from the it's about us and the channel and do the and all that sort of stuff, which is extraneous, and start telling people, like the Harvard Business Review article said, we can do amazing things for you. So why don't you maybe demonstrate some of those? A couple of others, which are one in terms of knowing your market and things like that and what you are. I thought this is, Hyatt CEO says hotels will ban hate groups. We need to draw the line. That's going to start getting good point. That starts getting tricky. Right. Because you go, well, the Family Research Council, which is an ultra conservative, Ralph Reed's organization sort of thing, it has been deemed a hate group by, I can't remember if it's the Southern Poverty Law Center or something. It's like, well, wait a second, hang on, are they or aren't? You're going to wind up cutting your end, and that's good. And I think, okay, well, Hyatt's going to take a stand on this, but then you have this whole public space sort of thing. Is this a club or a hotel? So this is going to get complicated for the hoteliers.
I read that, and it made me think about the Supreme Court case with the wedding cake, right? So
right.
where the baker at that point refused service to a gay couple because that he didn't support homosexuality or something like that, and so he made a choice on who he was going to sell to, and the Supreme Court backed him up. So when I read this piece, on
religious grounds based on his artistry. Sort of,
and they also remanded it back to the lower court because they said the lower court. The lower court basically made the ruling based on evidence that the Supreme Court said wasn't valid evidence to use in making the decision. Right. So that case is not yet decided. I just
feel like this is a real slippery slope. I mean, who makes that decision, right? So, Robert, back to your point. If the Southern Poverty Law Center says they're a hate group, but that's not official, right? So if you don't buy into that, so I'm just saying, I'm using that as an example, who makes that definition? And then what kind of blowback is the hotel brand willing to take? Because it could get big, right? Depending on which group, you decide not to serve.
Right. And with owners who go, wait a second, I'm a staunchly conservative, whatever, pro-life, all this stuff. This is really important. And maybe it's not that person, engaged in hate speech and denigrating the, people going, hey, I believe these are good things and I kind of like what they're doing. And all of a sudden you go, oh, well, I'm going to pull down the. I mean, the waters run deep under this stuff. And when you start getting tribalism in the society, you could start fueling tribal hotels, but that starts also getting away from the basic essence of hotel innkeepers, where you needed to, back in the Roman highway days, because I remember them vividly, you had to,
As drove along in a 64 Buick.
Exactly.
457 M.
Hey,
well done, Tim. Well done.
Hey, Tim. In 583, that was a hot car on those Roman highways. I want you to know.
I remember Buick's ad campaign.
It was hard to find a gas station though back then.
A 455 engine for 455 AD.
Oh, Tim, you are on fire.
So I'm going to take the other side of this for a moment, and I don't know where I come down on it because it's complicated.
It's a tough one.
It's a tough call. If the Klan wants to stay in your hotel, I think you're entirely within your rights to say, yeah, that's not going to happen.
Pepsi, if you really like Coca-Cola.
Here's the thing. When we talk about some of this stuff, and I know I'm always the one who shies away from politics, but we have to recognize the difference between what a private entity chooses to do versus what the government does, right? The government, I am a free speech absolutist, as people like to say and stuff. The government can't say you can't say hateful things, and it creates all kinds of problems if they do. because usually those laws that are designed to protect people who are marginalized almost always are then used to harm people who are marginalized, which is why we want free speech.
Right.
At the same time, if I, as a business owner, say, your views are reprehensible to me, and I do not want you in my property, there's probably a space for that the Supreme Court will have to decide how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, where that is in fact something you're allowed to do, or in fact it's something you're not allowed to do. You know, being an asshole is not a protected class. You know what I mean? So, wow, that went over like not at all.
No, I was going to make it funny about somebody, and I thought better of it.
I'm sorry. You know,
I was going to make it funny about something, and I thought better of it.
Okay, well, but I mean, realistically, I know we try to keep the show clean, but I mean, you know, I think in this case, if we say there is, you know, if people are burning crosses on people's lawns, or they're neo-Nazis or things along those lines,
well, I mean, I'll take this
private business can be able to say, I don't know that I want those folks in my property.
I'll take this to a direct level from property when I was GMing and so forth. I've denied businesses based on the risk factor associated with the property. You know, where groups came in that were, I wouldn't say desirable, not desirable, but they ran a risk of destruction to the property. They were not respectful of the treatment of the property, and I had them removed from the property because of that. Now, that's a denial of service in the same context that we're talking about. I had them removed because they were creating a uncomfortable environment for other guests. Now, it wasn't because of what they represented or what they believed in or what their preferences or things, as it was their behavior. But to say what you're saying is behavior is just as much a classification as identification. Okay, you're still
Not
making a
law,
business decision of refusal. No, not under the law, it's not. But the idea of it is that if you're making a business choice of to offer service or not to offer service, whether you base it on behavior or identification of whom they are and so forth, you're still making a conscious choice of denial, and that runs into that slippery slope of decision process. Where does that definition land? That is clear division between one side versus the other side, and it is incredibly hard. And I don't think, you know, sometimes it's well played, like if they do the Kaepernick and Nike, you know, willingly took the negative heat because now everybody was talking about them in the week before football. I don't think this Hyatt move is to their benefit to do it this way. I don't think that drawing this type of ire or this attention to their decision is a positive for them, because it opens up the question of, why would you want to make this such a bold statement? Why is this such an upfront statement? Why not keep it where you had it before?
So here's where I'm going to take the other side again, the devil's advocate.
It's interesting because I think they're looking at, we're against hate, which is great. That's a good thing. Everyone should be against hate.
Right. Any group who gets offended.
That definition to be refined. You're literally becoming
that's
the
where it gets
of
complicated.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And even in that article, there were, I mean, the articles, there's a little bit of clickbait in the article title, because there were sort of 3 paragraphs right at the beginning about that. And the policy wasn't even clear. I mean, there was no articulation of the policy. The Hyatt spokesperson just said, yeah, we're against hate groups. And when one group, because they had an anti-Muslim group in one of their properties outside DC, and they took a lot of flack for that. And so now but they haven't actually stated what their actual policy is, which is pretty smart of them. But that also means that how are they going to apply it? Right.
You're pushing the paper wall.
And that is where this gets complicated, because you know, to Robert's point precisely, you know, if we're saying we're banning hate groups, any group who immediately steps up and says, well, I'm offended because you're banning me. Well, you've just said you're a hate group. So guess what? If yourself, you know, we hate Nazis. And somebody says, hey, I take offense to that. Well, then you must be a Nazi. That's pretty straightforward, that those are the easy calls. The ones that are more complicated are, you know, who defines what a hate group is when it is unclear. I think that's going to be really complicated, and I think that's
where you get sued.
Right. Actually, if I can add one thing, to take it out of this specific area for a moment. I have a real world experience with this with a couple of properties. Back in my Wyndham days, there were a couple properties, the brands will remain nameless, it doesn't matter, because there was a big swingers convention in town. And a couple of our properties adamantly refused to provide rooms to people who were attending the convention if they explicitly stated they were there for the convention and the like and wanted to use the rooms for whatever activities they wanted to use the rooms for. We're not going down that path at all. And a couple of other properties were like, bring it on, man. We don't care. We think we have a duty of care. We think we have a duty to provide the rooms. We have a duty to make money. Ha ha ha. You know, right. Yeah. You know, it gets complicated, and the devil is in the details. The properties that refuse service to these folks also talk very heavily. It was less about their personal view of the thing and more about the fact that they were near to other family-friendly attractions and attracted a lot of families and things along those lines, and didn't want, you know, folks in their property who are going to make the bulk of their guests uncomfortable. Right. Based on their behaviors, right? Not based on
based on their expected behaviors is the complicated part.
They're expected and explicit behaviors, right?
Going back to the problem that this creates is, and again, they didn't define what it is that their ruling is or their legalities of how they're going to handle these things coming up. I remember when the ADA compliances came out, and all of a sudden you had lawyers going around, carpetbaggers, I call them, because they're going around banging things to challenge the rule. No, hold on. Let me follow. No, I'm going to bring it to where I want to bring it for this one. Because what it did was, because that ruling said that we had to do one versus another, or we're going to do this versus something else, it was challenged. And I'm going to bring this to Dallas's issue. There was an exotic convention that Dallas decided they did not want in their convention center. And they are still paying the legal costs associated with that, because now it turned into a vanguard of effort to prove that this is a violation of their rights to gather and everything else like this. So what's going to happen with Hyatt is some group, innocuous as it is,
absolutely,
wall to define what it is. And the minute, and this is the problem for Hyatt, the minute that they don't stand against it for what statement they just made as a bold thing, is going to get now blown into a negative of, I thought you said that but you didn't over, and then it turns into a huge anti-campaign.
Well,
so and here's the thing,
though. Hyatt may get targeted too, because they may come up with
they'll definitely get targeted.
That will get knocked out. Let's
run
go
down the gauntlet, basically.
And you get the ball gets put on the tee and the bat is swung, right?
Of course. And I mean, I have a couple of points I want to make here, Robert, Lauren. I understand what you're saying here, right? I completely understand what you're saying. First of all, I think we have to make a distinction between who you are and how you act. Right, a person who is physically impaired or disabled or things along those lines is not asking for equal accommodation because they're being jerks or because of how they act. They're asking for equal accommodation because otherwise they don't have any way to get in the room or take a shower. I mean, that's a separate thing entirely, right? Mm-hmm. Separate from that, anytime you have any of these, the lawyers are always going to get involved because they're looking to make their buck. So I mean, we know that's going to be true. But building on that, if I were, the CEO of Hyatt and things along those lines, and people said I'm unwilling to pay the legal fees to prevent Nazis from staying in my hotel, I'm okay with paying those legal fees. I will stand by that all day, every day, right? I mean, it's once you start to say, okay, how Nazi adjacent are we talking about? That's where it does get complicated, and undoubtedly is going to tie things up in courts for years because somebody is going to make them a target. But I applaud the intent.
Absolutely.
The execution is going to matter a tremendous amount.
And please know also, when I'm talking about the lawyers that I'm talking about, the ones for the ADA, those are the ones that said, I won't sue you if you give me money. I'm not talking about the
sure. No, I understand.
Lauren, by the way, the fact that they're getting money so that they wouldn't pursue you while you were going into compliance. Those are the people.
Lauren, 4 years of my career with Section 508C of the Rehabilitation Act of 1998, whether websites needed to be accessible to people who are visually impaired. Believe me, I've been on this side completely. I get it. And there were certainly people in that who had legitimate complaints, and there were certainly people in that who were looking to make a buck, right? I get it. The reality is, something like this, they're taking a stand to say, right now, there's too much nonsense out there, and there's too much hate, and there are too many people stirring up sentiments that there's a great XKCD cartoon. This is very, very popular. Hold on, I'm going to find this real quick because, free speech, I think is the one. Yeah, here we go. It's mostly text, right? Public service announcement. The right to free speech means the government can't arrest you for what you say. It doesn't mean that anyone else has to listen to your BS or host you while you share it. The First Amendment doesn't shield you from criticism or consequences. If you're yelled at, boycotted, have your show canceled, or get banned from an internet community, your free speech rights aren't being violated. It's just that people listening think you're an a-hole and they're showing you the door.
Right.
Right? That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about who people are. It's not like we're going to ban women from our thing, right? It's not like we're going to ban, minorities from our thing. We're saying people who are explicitly espousing hate and the, diminishment of others are not welcome in our hotels. And in principle, I could not agree with that more fully ever.
Isn't that stating the obvious? I mean, don't all of us already exercise that option?
Well, it seems to me that, I wonder if the reason that Hilton is doing this, because we haven't seen anybody else come forward.
Or Hyatt.
But yeah.
But we haven't seen anybody else come forward and make these kind of statements. So given that there was an explicit situation in a Hyatt property recently, if this just is not opportunistic, but Hyatt feeling that they have to respond from a corporate standpoint.
Right.
And my guess is that they wouldn't, because it does open up a can of worms, and we're not seeing anybody else step out and say the same thing. I tend to agree. So, Tim, everything you say is always right. So that's all fine. But I tend to.
That's not true, by the way. But
I tend to agree with Lauren here. I believe that Hyatt did this because they felt they had to address that.
Right.
Sure.
Because no other brand is stepping forward to say these things. It feels to me as a given, right? Hotels they don't want groups that call negative attention or that have anti-humanitarian needs, let's just say, or desires of that group, and they articulate them. The hotels are just there to provide a room and a bed, and most hotels just try to get out of the way of the politics if they can. In this particular case, it sounds like Hyatt couldn't. And so they had to do this. It's interesting that, Skift just played it up, right? As I said earlier, the headline felt a little clickbaity. Because there was almost no content in there about this. There was a whole lot more content about Hyatt's failed bid for NH Hotels, as an example, but the headline didn't talk about that. So, because, so what, right?
Who's going to click on that? Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
So this whole thing feels to me that it's not much other than just Hyatt trying to clear the air.
And cover their butt.
It probably could be just as straightforward as that. Just that incident, they want to publicly address it, and they left it at that. Very true.
Right.
Very true.
Well,
fair point.
And maybe they did the right thing, because it's always when you have one of these you want to overcompensate, right? To kind of say, hey, we did something. You acknowledge that you did something that that went wrong. You tell them, hey, we're going to do something not to, so that we're going to put in measures to prevent this happening again. And here is our policy, sort of thing, right? Are we good? And I think that's probably what they're doing. But the execution of this winds up getting tricky. Can we talk really quickly about Oyo, which is the Indian group, which is now going to
$1 billion?
The
$1 billion.
So, boy, this group now, Oyo, it basically finds these very, very small, dumpy hotels, right? Really substandard, horrible hotels, puts in some, basic standards and things like that, right? And commands a 25% fee for doing this. And it is on fire, and they just got $1 billion, $1 billion, and they're rolling.
Sorry, go ahead, Bella.
Well, I went looking for it this morning and I couldn't find it, but Max Starkov had put a comment on one of the places where this link was posted, and I thought it was on LinkedIn. I went looking for it this morning.
I think it was. Yeah,
well, I couldn't find it. I saw it a couple of days ago. But at any rate, his point of view was pretty good, right? 25%, that's a lot.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so what are you going to, so, and they're also apparently they also act as the primary distribution channel. So not only do they assess a 25% basically rooms revenue fee or whatever they're calling it on the property, they control your distribution and they take a piece of that as well. So, maybe what they're doing is finding hotels in places where, I don't know, there's sort of third and fourth markets where the hotels just have no other choice. If they want any kind of exposure, this is their only option. So it will work in certain parts of the world. It would never work in the U.S. and Western Europe and any kind of developed hospitality market. I can't really even see it working in China, especially in the big metropolises of China.
That was a big. China accounted for $600 million of this billion, right? So.
Right. So are we? Right. I doubt we're talking Shanghai or Beijing or Dalian. Right. We're probably talking about small cities out in the west and in the north where it's a different.
They've done some in major cities too, though. I mean, they've got 87,000 rooms in 171 cities. So they're, and pretty much between, predominantly in India and now rolling out.
By the way, is it just me or does everybody love the fact that Mac being retired now is just lighting everything on fire?
He is all over it. Yeah,
he's everywhere. Yeah. I'm like
literally anything I post on LinkedIn. Anything I post on LinkedIn,
Mac's
I get
unchanged.
His only comment, just have one that says "first" every time. Like that should just be the comment.
Oh yeah,
I've forgotten about that.
It is. I've always appreciated Max, and he
now
is very much.
Now he's got time.
Now he's got time. So everything lights up on it, like boom, on it, and I love his contrary opinion. He's like, yeah, no, and he'll go off in a different direction.
But in this specific case, I mean, well, not just in this specific case, but in this specific case, he's absolutely right, Val, and I think you're absolutely right. It will play well in. This is going to appeal to potentially a lot of hotel owners, but a specific segment of hotel owners, right? You're either in a place where there aren't brands and there aren't brands. I mean, in India, let's be fair, how many branded properties are there in India as a share of total properties? It's not a big number at all. No. You get into secondary and tertiary markets in China, that's true. You get into certain markets in Russia, that's true. You get into certain markets in Latin America, that's going to be true. You get into primary markets in the developed world, right? And there's still going to be the case of this one hotel over here that's been hemorrhaging cash for years, and the owners are like, fine, do that. So they have a play, but their entire business model is, and Robert, you're exactly right, it's built on start with really, really crappy property.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
there's a reason these guys aren't making money.
Oh no. Well, no. And they bring in a little bit. They bring in some standards. They bring in some, and they're elevating this low, really bad, sometimes quasi dangerous. I mean, all really nasty hotel, which is a great thing too.
Yeah.
Right. So it's So it's very interesting. But boy, getting $1 billion worth of investment and. The folks who are behind it, I mean, a lot of it came from SoftBank, and SoftBank has a ton of money. But, Sequoia, this is, A-tier investment in these guys. This isn't just some, they found some friends and relatives. So.
And it's got plenty of runway, and it's got plenty of opportunity because there are plenty of hotels where this is going to be true. They will have, Max is exactly right, Val, and you're exactly right, that there are certain hotels for whom this will always be a terrible idea. And if you get into Western Europe and North America and places like that, the vast majority of them, it would be a horrible idea for.
And if they're successful, which, there's a lot of money balanced on them being successful, they're going to see competitors, right? Which will put downward pressure on their costs. And so, which could just absolutely blow open these third and fourth tier markets, right? And in a way where legacy or, legacy hotel brands can't go in because they just don't want to. But I would expect within 5 years, OYO, if they're successful, and there's no reason why they wouldn't be, provided they stay focused, they'll have 3 or 4, they'll have competition,
Yeah,
which will
for
bring
sure.
those
Well, I think what it
prices
does
down and
validate-
make Matt's happier.
Well, I think what it validates.
But again,
scale.
that's the competition's going to be hard. The quick follower sort of strategy, right? Is certainly people will try to do that, but that's going to be harder to do because you really you need boots on the ground in these places to go. The sales cycle is going to be tricky.
Again, it validates the idea of scale, that you can come in and bring a bulldozer to a village that doesn't have a bulldozer, and do something. But it also adds validation of the value of scaled marketing. Obviously, if there's a demand into market, but the market is unaware to those, if you can bring that focus, that laser, and that lens to that market, and build business that didn't exist before because you have the scale to do it, it validates that whole model. But to everyone's point, the price modeling and where that actually works at the effect at the margin that they're running right now is a unique bubble in that sense.
Well,
it's unique.
Well, what I do find interesting about it, and this might be why SoftBank finds it interesting, and Sequoia and folks like that, is 3 years down the road, they might not need to take 25% because they may have sufficiently improved the property that its revenues drove to the point where, they may have built into their model the fact that, we have to charge a lot at the upfront because there's a lot of upfront costs to make this place, habitable.
That's exactly, exactly. The rising tide lifts all boats, right? Some of those properties aren't as properties just generally, they can't remain as derelict or down market as they are because the market the bottom of that market just falls out.
Right, exactly.
It could very well be. It could be that they improve the quality or the standard of a small property in these areas to the point where you're right. The owners take better care of the assets.
Right, and the ADR goes from I can picture where some of these properties are. The ADR, actually, let's call it RevPAR, right? The RevPAR on some of these places is probably, and I'm not joking, the RevPAR is probably what, $12, $15? So if they take that RevPAR to $30, right?
Yep, you bet.
26.
They're still making
they don't
more
have
money
to charge.
than they had before.
Correct.
Yeah.
They don't have to charge 25% to make their nut if they're Oyo. Right. So that's really where I think this has some potential in the longer term. So I agree with Max in principle, but not necessarily in execution, given where they are as a company.
It's a fascinating. They're fascinating.
They're definitely worth watching. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Now, from a time consumption point of view, just to mention, we're 5 minutes before 1 o'clock Eastern, and we never got out of the brand categorization today.
I was just going to say that.
Our first efforts on can we diversify our conversation?
But we didn't been on the show most of the time.
And I was going to say, I haven't been on the show in weeks, and this is the most stories we've covered in one episode that I can remember.
Including the Buick.
Because Ed's not here to get us off track, which is why I felt compelled.
As a school with the Buick.
I felt compelled to fill in for Ed.
It was an homage to Ed. Is that what it was?
It was an Ed Saint homage.
Man.
You're definitely keeping the pace today.
Remember to tip your waiters. He will be here all week.
You should
try the veal. He'll be here until Thursday.
Tim, because you will be the life of him.
This is why I only show up every few weeks these days. I just got to build up some material, and then
Do we want to do the front row, or is there a topic of choice that we would like to do?
I thought maybe we should approach this like Jeopardy. It's like, I'll take brands for 800, Alex. Do we want to talk about Disney World's new pricing system? I thought.
Well, I can only talk about like one other thing, and then I do have to go. I don't have a hard stop at 1, but I can't stay much past about 1:15. So
because he can't handle anymore. Yes.
Well, you ran out of material.
I gotta go. Exactly. I have to go tune up my.
He has an hour and a half. He has an hour and a half of material, and after that, he goes bone dry.
That's right.
I leave it to you all. I can certainly be here until 1:15. I just want to make sure I'd be mindful of it. That everybody. I love the conversation. Never get me wrong.
I just think the Disney article. Disney has really been pushing the envelope on revenue management, right? Because they've got this extreme quantity of demand, and now they are going to start. And I think this is going to be very interesting to see how it really manifests itself. But how long you stay in the park and things like that, right? Where and all of a sudden all the parks are now the same price, which is a huge boost for
Yeah.
because they've really pushed the envelope. I can't remember if it's 100 and I don't know how it's well over $100, certainly for like Walt Disney World for Magic Kingdom, but now Animal Kingdom is going to be the same price. Hollywood Studios is going, and they're enhancing those, right? They've got the Avatar attraction at Animal Kingdom, things like that. So they've now boosted that opportunity where, I think they realized, people were buying down into these other parks, and that was, wound up being a drag on profitability. So let's boost that back up. So, but now it's going to be very, very strict where you used to get these, 4-day passes or things like that. You could use them within 2 weeks. That was great because you could then go in and, you'd spend at Disney. You could go to Universal for a couple of days. You come back to Disney. All of a sudden, you now have to say, here's the day you're arriving to lock you in. And I think strategically, this is Disney going, oh, no. And you can only use them over a certain number of days. It's a very tight time frame. All of a sudden, it's going to make that Universal visit trickier, right? If you really need to make sure you go to Disney. So lots of strategy going into this, lots of revenue. I mean, they are leading the charge on this in a big way.
I think it's really smart. I wish Ed were here for this one for the specific reason that Ed is probably our
and that's why I
Disney,
put it in there.
Like he lives at Disney, right? He goes there all the time.
Yes, he does.
He knows more about how they price and what it costs them and things like that. Like I'm really curious how guests will respond to this. I think it could be brilliant. And I think we can see them backpedaling from this a little bit in time if they get a lot of backlash from folks who are frequent travelers through Disney saying, wait, this used to be something that was affordable for me and my family, and I can't do that now.
Well, they're going to give you a calendar. They're going to give you a calendar of when you can visit when it's cheaper, which may cause a lot of kids to be pulled out of school.
Oh, and they would hate that. Yeah. So the interesting thing to me is one of Disney's messages is we want to make sure that the customer experience remains good, and so on peak days it's a zoo, right? It's so crowded. I mean, I'm sure they're already crowd control in place.
They do. Yeah.
But what they're really trying to do is push people out across. That's their message, right? And so so it's less about we're gonna stick it to you, and more about we're gonna make your experience better, and you could have a better experience and pay less if you're willing to play by these rules. So in a way, it is Disney, right? Nobody should be surprised. They're super, super smart, and the most sophisticated revenue management companies out there next to the casinos, right? So nobody should be surprised. I just like the message where they say, we're doing this because we want you to have a better experience.
Right. For sure. Well, and as somebody who took a couple of young adults to Universal last summer, not this summer, but we went to Universal. My kids got to see Harry Potter World for the first time, which they've been dying to do. And we had a really good time. We also, because it was the only time we could get away and things like that as a group, we took six people in all. It was a zoo. It was a monstrosity. And if you tell me I could have paid $100 more a head to go there on a day when I was going to deal with fewer people or something like that, or keep out the riffraff, I would have.
Didn't we just have this discussion with the Hyatt topic?
That would have been the $600.
Universal has that. Right. Universal does it differently. You can go pay $150 a head, and you get VIP, and you're going to be right at the at the front of the lines, right?
Nobody told me that. See, that's what happens when you let your kids figure out when you're going places.
Oh yeah, but there is a big pay to play angle on Universal.
Oh, yeah. but in all seriousness, I mean, it was a good experience. It could have been a better experience, just because the place was overrun. Right, it was just too many people. So this could be cool.
Oh, what? A pro tip, do not go to Epcot on New Year's Eve, because Epcot, I don't know, with this new policy, hopefully they will capacity control it, but all the other parks are capacity controlled. Epcot is not, so it just gets stuck. Worst Disney experience I've ever had. It was...
I never would have occurred to me to go there on New Year's Eve in the first place. I didn't realize, I'm not being funny, I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah. So
there's going to be different prices.
Not far from Times Square. We stay away from people on New Year's Eve.
I bet. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's amateur night.
Exactly. It's
we
amateur
were
night, exactly.
down visiting my mother-in-law, things like that. We made the trip today because we were in the area. That was the day that fit. The calendar looked like, well, that one might not be as bad. No,
that makes sense.
Big mistake. But anyway, they're doing some really, really aggressive stuff on here, which will be very interesting to see how it all turns out.
So for the rut row, so if we talk about the rut row for a minute, I just wanted to say, what? I mean, don't people know that the pictures on social media and generated by destinations and hotels are in fact best case scenario? I mean, really? Is this a thing?
Yes, it's a thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't have no idea because they are.
Remember Oyster? Or what was it, Room 99 or Room 90? I forget what the name of it. I think it's still around.
Room 77.
Yeah, thank you. Where they were showing the real picture in the same location as the glamorized picture to show the building was photoshopped.
Probably Oyster, yeah.
There was Oyster, yeah. And it is true. People are like, what do you mean this isn't going to be my experience? Which I have to say was a marketing issue for me for one of my clients. They were touting their best rooms, but there was only 10th of their inventory was the best rooms. And it was totally irritating the people when they show up and they didn't get the room that was in the picture. And it's like, we actually had to splinter the marketing. Somebody's like, don't show those rooms. Don't show them and charge for them, but show the real room so that people don't come in getting really mad at the fact that they're not getting that pretty room over there. But yeah, it is still unfortunately a reality that people don't recognize that, it doesn't look like that,
And in full disclosure, the first time I ever went to Paris, I did not realize what a pain in the ass it is to get to the Arc de Triomphe. Like it's it's a great way to get killed in traffic.
So you just
I didn't realize it was right in the middle of the busiest intersection in the world. I'm a fairly sophisticated traveler, and I went, it's on a traffic island in the middle of
yes, it
in the middle
is
of an interstate. That's interesting.
And I don't know how many people are killed every year with the stupid tourists, even though it's pretty obvious.
Across the Champs-Élysées. Yeah.
Just taking a shortcut because they're pressed for time because they still got to get to the Louvre and hit 3 more places, right? So.
Right.
For sure. Yeah, some of the pictures in the rut row, just for people who haven't said, disappointing photos show what 9 top luxury destinations look like in real life. And it's when these places get busy, it can be very ugly.
That's a lot of bodies crammed into a small space.
Oh yeah. By the way,
but then again, this kind of validates, since Ed's not here, we get to say nice things about him temporarily, and that's a little bit of what is his model, is that consumer sentiment engagement validates the product a lot better than the stylized way that traditional marketing has historically done. That people have realistic expectations as to what their experience will be, rather than the artificial ones that are usually marketing messages. So,
by the way, the first time I ever went to Venice, if I can give you a pro tip, the first time I ever went to Venice was in late October, and it's a great time to go. It's a fantastic time to go because it's not crowded, it's not too hot, it's not cold yet. It doesn't smell bad because it's not hot and filled with a lot of tourists. And Venice can smell bad because canals.
San Antonio.
You sometimes have to deal with rain and stuff like that, but as long as it doesn't rain too much, you won't have too much flooding to deal with. It's actually a lovely time to go. We had a wonderful time in Venice in October.
Yeah, we're going next year in March. Yeah, which should be
should be good too.
Which should be great. Yeah.
Yep.
Venice what did they ban though? I believe they're looking at banning alcohol in the streets or something like that. Like basically putting in an open container law or something like that.
I do think this speaks to a bigger rut row, of course, which is, over tourism and the problems that creates, and there's a lot of challenges. And I mean, we all rely on tourism for our livelihoods and the like. I think we're all big supporters of tourism. It has way more benefits than negatives. But over tourism is a very real problem. You look at what Barcelona has done in terms of its new ordinances regarding the number of hotel rooms that can be there and the number of tourists that can come and the like. And, some places and as somebody who goes into New York all the time, like, going near Times Square is the worst experience you can possibly have.
It depends on the type of experience you're looking for, Tim. I don't know.
Well, even
No, Times Square doesn't have that kind of experience anymore, Robert. You're still thinking of Times Square in the 70s.
Yeah.
So
Being
like
booked by Elmo.
Yeah.
So even the
Sorry.
national park. So we go to Acadia up in Maine often,
Yeah.
and they this coming summer they're going to institute for the first time timed park entrances because
Right.
there's a road that you drive around Acadia, and it's stunningly beautiful. But they have traffic jams where the traffic just comes to a halt on this road, and you don't go anywhere. And so the thing is that they're just it's just a degraded experience. But people are completely up in arms about it. What do you mean I can't drive my car into a national park anytime I feel like it?
Right.
Well, and it just kind of goes back full circle to the Disney process. Eventually, there will be a pricing model on max capacity booking into the park to go to what you said, Tim, where to alleviate the diminished experience that they're going to do on the compression of demand for it. I mean, they're going to get sophisticated enough to be able to do that by either pre-booking prices or arrival prices, of walking in the door and the gate that, hey, we're at 98% capacity. If you want to walk in the door, you're $200 because you're now diminishing the experience for others. Or simply say that you're increasing your price to get into a limited opportunity day where they.
I would hope in the national parks they don't do that. By the way, I would hope the national parks become first come first serve because national parks should be open to everybody.
Well, Yosemite already has first come first serve.
Yeah,
but I mean, it shouldn't be a thing that only the rich get to experience.
Right.
It should be something that everybody gets.
Yeah, Tim makes a valid point because it is public space.
Right.
But
private stuff is a different matter. But public space,
you still have to manage it somehow, right?
Oh, yeah,
because you degrade not only the natural resource but the experience. And so.
Right, and you wind up destroying the reason people
want to go there in the first place.
First place, yeah, exactly.
For sure.
So, one of the rut rows I was going to consider was another national park thing where they had a guy who was basically walked off the path in Yellowstone and was putting his feet into one of these.
Well, I thought he
geysers.
urinated into one of the geysers. That's what I read.
Oh, did he? Oh, he did that too. I didn't see that part. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't
see that. If you got any blowback at the wrong moment, that was going to make for an interesting day, huh?
Yeah.
So actually, one of my husband's coworkers went off one of the paths at Yellowstone and put his foot right into a hot spot and burned all the skin off of him from the knee down. I mean,
oh my God.
He's still. Wow. I mean, this was 4, 5, 6 years ago, and he'll never recover.
Mother Nature. Good for Mother Nature. Sorry, I have absolutely. Yep.
Mother Nature telling you better to be pissed off than to be pissed on.
Mother Nature just trying to thin the herd. That's all that's happening. This is natural selection. I spent 3 months working in Yellowstone National Park. I've seen.
Wait a minute. Was that when you were driving your Buick?
I did not drive the Buick there, but
what do they call those?
I think we're coming to a natural end to this show, Lauren.
I think we are. Actually.
We are a natural end to the show.
A natural disaster.
Right. Okay. Mr. Tim, as always, thank you so much. If people want to know more about what it is you do, your amazingly excellent podcast and blogs, where can they find you?
TimPeter.com for all that stuff. I am at TCPeter on Twitter. Otherwise, Tim Peter pretty much everywhere else.
Awesome. Mr. Robert?
You need to buy Tim Peter. You need to buy that.
I know. It's some dude in Germany who's got like 12 followers. I've talked to him about it a couple of times. He's like, no, I like having my name. And I'm like, dude, come on, man. Help me out here.
Oh, it is.
Hook him
so it wasn't.
Robert, where can they find you and the wonderful Rock Cheetah?
At Robert K. Cole, pretty much consistently across social media, and rockcheetah.com.
And Val, we're about Nor1 and all the other fun stuff that you do?
So for my company, Nor1, you can find us at www.nor1.com. And I am Valen.Perini or at Valen.Perini just about everywhere on social media.
And if you want to know Lauren Gray, it's a 16-year-old girl that does music.
Exactly.
Is that true, actually?
No, you need to search Lauren Gray.
Followers on Instagram.
Awesome.
I can't tell them apart.
No, wait.
I get this constantly.
Like twins. We're like twins.
Artists on Apple Music.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Music. Yeah, she's getting more and more popular. She's releasing albums. God knows, because I have a following of people like, you're not her. And I'm like, guess what?
Just a theory. I have never seen both of them together in the same room. Just a theory, you know.
But ironically, I'm getting a lot of requests for my domain names and all the other things that I boxed when I was smart enough to do so many, many years ago, because I have Lauren Gray pretty well boxed up when it comes to domains.
Right.
And I've been approached several times with, we'd like to buy your domain. Yeah, no. Anyways,
nonetheless, but they can find you, Lauren, at.
Yes, at hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com. Archives of the show will be /live. You'll have a link to all of our shows for this entire year and links to the archives of the years past, because we are in year 4 right now.
Wow.
Of our show, which is the inaugural of loading this up as an audio broadcast as my podcast. I'm bringing back alive my audio cast by using literally our audio from this show, because that's how I found out most people listen to our show is literally audio. So we're going to throw it into the podcast channels. Awesome. With that said,
very good.
Thank you very much, everyone, for the time. Sincerely, we kind of put some structure to it, so we got to something like Tim said. We hit more topics than we have historically, so we're getting there. I mean, hopefully, it was enjoyable for those who listened to it as well. So, with that, thank you, everyone, and we will see everyone for show number 165.